Hello and welcome back to another of Harry's Jeti Clinic. Today we're going to look at the basics of telemetry and telemetry sensors. I try and keep these videos to a reasonable time, no more than 10 minutes, so we'll see just how far we get, and if needs be then I can do further episodes on doing more advanced stuff with the telemetry. When telemetry first started, I thought, what a gimmick, who needs that? Now I would not be without it. It is fantastic and in some cases utterly invaluable for helping you save a model. For this demonstration, I'm just going to use a very simple, straightforward REX10 with one of the few telemetry sensors I've got hanging around, not already in a model, an MUI 75, which is a voltage and current sensor. So we'll see how we get on. At the moment, the receiver's powered up, the sensor is not plugged in, so let's start off. And the first thing we're going to do is just check that where we're going to plug it into the receiver is set up for a sensor. So we go into Menu, Model, Device Explorer, into our receiver, down to Alternative Pin Configuration. You think, what the heck's this? Why should I configure a pin? Well, these receivers are not like the old-fashioned receivers where the sockets that you plug a servo into were just that. These now are like lots of little mini USB sockets connected to the computer that's inside your receiver. And therefore, they can do all sorts of things. You just have to tell it what it is. For example, output pin 1, in other words, servo socket 1. It's defaulted to a servo, but you can change that. You can tell it it's DTEX, which means the Hacker or Jeti DTEX range of servos, which actually have lots of telemetry from them. But you have to tell the little computer inside your receiver that this port is now for DTEX rather than standard servo. Or you can tell it it's a digital output or digital input port. That does not mean digital servos. Those would still be a servo or a DTEX servo if necessary. Digital input and output's something quite different. Can cover that some other time. Much more advanced stuff if needs be. Anyway, we would come down to here, for instance, servo socket 8 or E2, and it's marked as that on the receiver. That means it's an expander socket, and it's E2 because there's also expander socket E1. You can see that E2 has defaulted, socket 8, oblique E2 has defaulted still to being a servo. It can be all these things as well. And same with E1, but we're going to use the EXT port, which can only be a Jeti box sensor port. That's all that's in its list. Whereas expander port E1 could be a Jeti box sensor port. It's defaulted to XBus, but it can be other different things as well. Okay, so we're going to plug into this, and as I say, that's the only choice it has. We're using a sensor, that's good, but if you wanted to use one of the expander ports, just make sure you've set it to the right thing. Many of the Jeti sensors, because they're a bit legacy old design for days of modules rather than Jeti transmitters, do not work on XBus. So you would have to convert expander port 1 to Jeti box sensor. Many, well, not many, the latest sensors that they've brought out tend to be XBus, which is a lot better. So you could maybe use XBus there, but turn it back to sensor as well. Okay, so our receiver is set up for it. Let's have a look in timers and sensors. Go to the sensors or logging setup menu, have a look in there, and there's nothing there. Okie dokie, no problem. I will now plug the MUI into the EXT port, and we'll wait and see what happens. This will take a little bit of time. You can, if you wish, press the auto button, but it should find things without you doing that. But if you want to force it, press auto. And it's starting to find things. Notice it's found one parameter so far, which is number 5 parameter, the energy, watt minutes. And we'll let it keep running till it finds more things. It's found 2 parameters. The name is actually a parameter. So it's found the name and one of the things we're really interested in. So it's got 2 of them. And we'll just let it keep running. Oh, here we go. It's found the voltage and the energy now. But we can tell it's missing things because it's found parameter 1, parameter 5. So we've still got at least 2, 3, 4 to find. And maybe there's something above 5. Here we go. It's found parameters 1, 2, 5. So we're still looking for 3 and 4. Here's 3. Still waiting for parameter number 4. There we go, the runtime, parameter 5. So it's found 6 things in total. That's the name and 5 individual bits of data. I happen to know that that's the end for this one, but some sensors send a lot more, so you have to leave it a while till you're happy that the count has reached the maximum, and that's it. You can overload the telemetry system with lots and lots of sensors sending lots of parameters, and if you reach the maximum number, which I forget what it is unfortunately, but I'd managed to do it in my McDonnell Douglas Phantom, then it just simply stops sending and therefore listing various parameters. It's a pity you cannot switch them off at the sensor itself, because a lot of them are duplicated. Like you might have several sensors sending you the temperature. Do I really want to know? It's multiple times, and frankly I don't want to know it at all. But there you go, you can overload the system. Anyway, what's it up here? MIUI 75. We can change that. If you've got several sensors in a model, especially if you've got several MIUIs telling you about different batteries, you can simply go into it, delete its name, and give it another name. And let's say I will be using this on the motor, so rather than just call it battery, I shall call it motor. Or you could call it the motor battery and the turbine battery, and you might have some on your power to your receivers and things like that. Name it. Now, these items down here where it says yes at the end, what it's asking you is, do you want to log them? In other words, do you want to save this to the SD card so that after the flight you can look at it on the screen here, or look at it later on a computer in something like Jeti Studio? And you can leave them all at the yes, log them all, or for neatness and being a bit, trying to keep things tidy, I like to turn some of them off. So for instance, I don't want to know the watt energy. I'm not going to review that in future, the watt minutes used, so I would turn that to a no. But to be honest, if you've got an SD card with many gig of memory, it's going to take you a long time to fill that up. So are there any advantages to turning this off? I don't really know. If you change the logging to no, the transmitter is still receiving the data. You can still display it on the front screen. You can still set voice outputs and alarms from it. You can still use it for telemetry controls. All this does is say whether or not you want to record the incoming data onto the SD card. If we have a look further up in this menu, we see it's sensor logging. Do you want to log the receiver voltage and the antenna data? And it defaults to yes. I would suggest yes, you do want to log that, because should you have a loss of control at any point, or worse still, a crash, it's blooming useful to be able to have a look at the receiver voltage and the antenna and data quality numbers, because you might be given a big hint there as to why things went out of control. And transmitter status info, if we look in here, allows you to switch on or off, and it defaults to switched on. Yes, logging alarms and messages. So any alarms that the transmitter has generated get logged as well. Very handy to have. And you can log input controls. You could log here, for instance, how you were steering the sticks. We could say, I want to log the elevator. Okay, not very interesting. What would be interesting to log is, say, a switch. And you could set one of your switches to do this. Why might you want to do that? Well, suppose you've got the airspeed sensor and you want to establish the stall speed of the model. You can have it trying to read out speeds to you, etc., or what? Try and watch it on a graph later and see exactly when it's stalled. Not easy. But if you were to set a switch to be logged, then when the event that you are looking for happens, such as the model stalls, or you think you're at peak current, or the model's furthest away from, whatever it is, flick the switch. Or if it's a spring-loaded switch, just ping it. And later on, when you look at the graphs, you will see very clearly when that switch swapped from plus 100 to minus 100, or just did a spike if you're using the spring-loaded switch, and you can see the exact time that you did that. And you can then look back at your other log, such as your airspeed or whatever, look at that exact time and see the exact value when it happened. Okay, so come out of there. And that's your basic sensors and logging set up. Now, up here is a black square, and that tells you the status of whether stuff is being recorded or not. If it's a black square, no recording is happening. If it's a flashing black circle, it's being recorded. So how do we set that off? Well, one simple way is just press start. It means start logging. Watch what happens to the black square when I press start. There it goes. It's a flashing black circle, so it is now logging the data. We can stop it, but you think to yourself, I don't want to be bothered doing that every flight, I just want it to happen. Well, we can get it to log it automatically. Go into menu, into advanced properties, down to so stay at other models options, and here is what gets logging going. At the moment, the logging mode is automatic, meaning that once it's started, it will keep logging until you switch the transmitter off. If you want to, you can set it to start stop. But what about a start logging switch? Well, you can set that to be a physical switch somewhere to start it logging, but that's no different having to press the start button. Okay, let's leave it with no switch in mode auto. Come out of there, go into timers and sensors. We'll create a timer, add, edit it, give it a little label. I'll just call it T for the moment, say OK. And the switch, now I will set a physical switch for this, but you could set it to be your throttle. Why not? There's our throttle, say it's proportional. The switch on point's going to be there. That's quite usual if you've got, say, an electric model, but I say I can set it to a physical switch if I want. Now, because we've created a timer, the system will automatically put the timer up for you. And it doesn't matter whether it's a count up or a countdown timer. As soon as the timer starts, logging starts. And because it's on auto, once we've triggered it, it will keep going. So even though I stop the timer, logging keeps going. Okie doke. And that is it. We'll stop there. We're coming up to 15 minutes. So in episode 2, we'll move on to displaying and using the telemetry.